Hello, everybody. I'm Bob226, aka Josiah, your DFS Army. This is the NBA Tournament Strategy Show, and today we're going to see what happened yesterday, dig through it, talk through the details. I know my guy Taco is already talking about one of the misses from yesterday, and then we will look at today's slate and win. So let's look through yesterday quickly. It's weird, like looking back we didn't miss as much as it feels like we did, but we got a ton right. We had a few winners, like had a few people DM me as well. So we had a decent day yesterday. The winning lineup for the 100K was 327.5 points. It had Luka Doncic, who we were on. I boosted him in my video, but again, it was one of those situations where he was so expensive, you didn't have to play him. While also there were other studs you could pay up for as well. Kyrie Irving went off. I'm surprised he didn't make the nuts, honestly. But I guess it's good he didn't, because I didn't really boost him yesterday as well. Aaron Wiggins was also in this line. We liked Aaron yesterday. Kenrich Williams was also in there. We were also pretty high on Kenrich Williams. Darius Bazley made the nuts lineup. I was not on Darius Bazley at all. I know quite a few people, and I know I even mentioned this too, that the OKC front court, one of them were going to go off. It was just tough to decide which one was going to. I can't say his last name for the life of me, but I believe it starts with a P. There were some other front court guys on OKC's team that did well, but this was kind of like the stack that landed in the nuts. After that, we have Steven Adams, who I'm surprised made it. I know he was out for a little bit, but we were on him as well. Desmond Bane crushed. Apparently, John Morant isn't that big a deal in Memphis anymore. Totally kidding, by the way. John Morant still owns this team, but Desmond Bane is making his presence known. Like, it's real. Andrew Wiggins in the forward spot, he was one that I was not on. I preferred just other Golden State pieces instead of Wiggins. But he didn't crush yesterday, but he did enough to fill out the line. And then the last remaining spot is Bam Adebayo, who was a core for me yesterday. So nice to see him crush. So overall, we got a lot right, but we were, at least for me personally, I was missing Bazley and Andrew Wiggins. My top line was like 300, which wasn't special yesterday. Pretty average. Moving on. That yesterday was in the past. Screw it. We had a great day Wednesday. Doesn't matter. Yeah, Taco, you're right. I think if more people played Irving, he could have slid in there, but I think the people who played him were just in weird. He was just in some really ugly lines. Definitely people who paired Irving and Doncic. It sounded really good afterwards, but I just think those lines were filled with so much crap, they still didn't do anything, which is funny. Like, it's so weird when that happens that, like, even though we had two studs go off, you would think that the perfect line would have both of them in there, but nope, it only had one, and it was Doncic, the more expensive one, which is even weirder, but whatever. Moving in to today's slate. It's a big one, so that's why we got to move a little quick. An 11-gamer. Oh, yes, Taro, you're right. My biggest mishap yesterday was freaking Paul George. I have no idea. I'm not even going to talk about it, but Paul George was freaking awful yesterday. Biggest disappointment in a great situation. Also, Norman Powell. We talked about Norman Powell yesterday on this show. He didn't make the nuts line, but randomly going off. It's like I said, like I had this weird feeling that Norman Powell was going to do something, but it just didn't make any sense that he would. And he did. So that's the way things work sometimes. All right. He was super cheap on FanDuel. So if you were over there, you probably played him by default. This first game, Magic versus the Hornets. The Magic are without Jalen Suggs and Cole Anthony, which brings a lot of the value up. And a lot of the usage and minutes will increase for this Magic's team. I actually want to let's take the Hornets out of it altogether, who are also an interesting team themselves, but I just want to see who's popping. So Paolo Banchero, we like playing bigs against the Hornets in general already. Paolo has been destroying and crushing this entire season. He's still below 8K, and he's facing a bad Hornets team. this game, like Terrell, you're so right. This game is one that we do not want to ignore, and it's the opening game too. So curtain jerker, it's interesting for sure. Franz Wagner is also in a great spot. I think this is a potential really sneaky spot for Terrence Ross. I hate playing Terrence Ross, by the way. But this just feels like a really sneaky spot for him. Other guys that we need to keep an eye out for, Wendell Carter Jr. as well is a big on this team. We already talked about what to do there. Definitely in play. In regards to the Hornets on this team, I like Gordon Hayward a lot in this matchup. Like, all of these guys in this game are cheap, and this is a great environment where the pace should be back and forth. The spread is 2, which is pretty close, 2 points. So I like it. I'm not as high on Mason Plumlee, but I get it because of his price. So I think this, Kelly Oubre is also in a great spot along with Dennis Smith Jr. Really, there's no one that I don't want to play from this game besides maybe PJ Washington. I'm just never that high on him. But this game is one that we probably either you want a piece of it in all of your lineups, or you think that, or it's something you want to fade to try to be contrarian. 2 ways of thinking about situations like this, but I will have exposure to it. After this, let's look at the Hawks and the Pistons. Yeah, for sure, Joe. For the Magic, RJ Hampton, Terrence Ross, these guys are definitely going to be some pay down options for you. I think we'll have better value options later in some of these later games. But they are some like fringe. I don't know if they'll be super chalky, but they're pay down options. For sure. I don't know. We've updated again. Like I doubt we've updated like all the projections and ownership and things of that sort yet because it's still early in the day. But RJ Hampton's definitely like a GPP sleeper. I don't think he's like going to be super chalky. Anyway, moving forward, this game, Trae Young, DeJounte Murray, they've been dominating the league so far. They've both had multiple 50-point games at this point. Like I said earlier in the season, I've loved John Collins ever since DeJounte Murray joined this team. So far, DeJounte Murray's been more of like the distributor, getting points from like a peripheral standpoint, and Trae Young's been more of their prolific scorer, if that's what you want to call it. So Trae Young's a bit more scoring dependent. So his floor is not as safe as DeJounte Murray's, but of course, his upside from scoring is slightly higher, I would say, than DeJounte Murray's. Personally, I think they're both in a smash spot against the Pistons, so I'm not going to overthink it too much. They're just, but with a 12 gamer, we'll see how they fit in from like a financial standpoint into our lines, but they're definitely in a solid spot. When it comes to the Pistons, I'm not as interested in them. Cade Cunningham, even in his rookie season, he started pretty slow. Like I remember in the Discord chat, we used to have, he was super cheap, was coming in his first few games when he was starting, and he would put up dud after dud after dud, and everyone was like, we're not playing Cade Cunningham. And he was like 6,000 or something like that. And he just refused to perform until like his 6th or 7th game. And of course he crushed, and then he started to do better. So I'm hoping this is his sophomore season. I'm hoping maybe he just had like a decent off season or not so great off season, and now he's like slowly warming up. So I'm not like against Cade Cunningham or anything like that. It's just that he's starting off the season slow. So he'll probably still be in the pool, but it's just a little bit of a tough matchup. Ivy's questionable for this game, so definitely keep an eye out for that. For the front court, when it comes to guys like Isaiah Stewart and Jalen Duren, they're super talented, like obviously, but it's a little bit too much to me mouths to feed on this Pistons team for me right now when it comes down to usage. Like we've seen Bogdanovich have really big games. We've seen Sadiq Bey, man. He's a roller coaster of results. Like we've seen him have good games and really bad ones as well. I don't know if this game's going to be one I get a ton of exposure to, but there definitely are some interesting pieces here. All right, next up we have this Cleveland versus Celtics game. Okay. Bridge Lion, bet on Cade, first career triple-double. All right, plus 750, that's not bad. It's not bad. Against the Hawks, too, who aren't really known for their defense. Don't hate it. All right, so with the Cavs, they will be without Darius Garland still, which means that Donovan Mitchell is still a solid play. He hasn't really had like slate breaking upside from what I'm recalling so far this season. But he has had a 33.7% usage rate, doing well from like a points per minute basis, while Garland's been out the floor, and the spread is pretty wide with like the Celtics winning. If Cleveland can keep this competitive though, like Donovan Mitchell would be really interesting here. Yeah, and this is a fine game to fade as well. I think on a 11 game slate, there's going to be plenty of games you can fade. And a lot of the fades are going to be the ones, from my standpoint, are going to be the ones that don't have the value that we're really excited about. So I don't think you're thinking about it in a bad way, Don Juan. But I do think Donovan Mitchell, Jason Tatum will be in play here. Karis LeVert has also will benefit with Garland being out. Evan Mobley hasn't been that great so far this season, but he's definitely still in play. Jared Allen has actually been the guy. For me, coming into the season, I was like, for the Cleveland Cavaliers to do well, they will need Evan Mobley to really turn it up so far this season. But from where I'm standing, it's really been Jared Allen so far. Adele said, driving back to Raleigh from Cherokee, had to tune in. Let's get this money. Hey, I appreciate you tuning in, man. I really appreciate the support here at DFS Army. I always mention it, like we have the pre-lock show later today at 5:30 p.m. But it'll actually be at 4 p.m. today because the tournament tactics show for NFL is at 5. So definitely tune into the pre-lock show today at 4. You have to be a VIP member. And so if you check out the description below, you will see a link and a code for a 10% discount to become a VIP member here at DFS Army. So you can see all the coach notes, and you can use the optimizer. You can join the pre-lock show. A lot of pros. We actually had for NFL content, we had a $17,000 winner yesterday. So congrats to him. Let me actually get his name. Let's give him some representation here. Respect on the name. And he did it in such like a quiet way. Like you wouldn't have known it unless like you actually just look. There was like no comment or anything. Tamales poo sauce. Okay, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have said his name because I don't know how to say it. But at least it's out there. Congrats to you, man, getting that 17K for the showdown last night. So definitely a lot of reasons to join DFS Army. Moving on though, if you want to go back to the Al Horford train, you can. He's appropriately priced at 5,200. He just hasn't looked great, you know. Jason Tatum is also in play. I know we already talked about him a little bit with Donovan Mitchell, but he's still below 10K. And for how well he's been scoring and doing this season, you would think he'll be up there with the 10K guys. Jaylen Brown's always a GPP play for me. If he gets into some lineups, he can. I'm not going to force it. And then last but not least, we have Marcus Smart here, who I think is just kind of like a mid-range lineup filler. So not against him, but not trying to force it. All right, the Sixers-Raptors game is another interesting one that I'm looking forward to on this slate. Mostly because this Sixers team is one of the only teams I create a rule for now in the domination station. We've seen Embiid have a decent game. We've seen Harden have ceiling games. We've seen Tyrese Maxey have ceiling games. And the interesting thing about all of them is just that we're not seeing multiple guys go off on this team. It's typically just one. Now I'm going to be careful. Like I'm not a rules guy. I don't create too many rules. And so I know in the past we've seen Embiid and Maxey have ceiling games together. So I'm still going to allow that. But for Harden he had a decent game when Maxey had his ceiling game last time out. but he didn't hit his ceiling. So I'm going to create a rule where Harden is not in any lineups with Embiid or Maxey. Only because his usage is just so high when he's having a ceiling game performance that it has to be him. And he's looked good. He's had 27.4 usage rate. For me, guys like Tobias Harris is. I really only play Tobias Harris on small slates, but I'll probably still leave him in the pool for like secondary option. Pascal Siakam has looked fantastic this season. I always say the Raptors scare me a little bit just because they have so many mouths to feed, but even still, Pascal Siakam has had at least 48 points in multiple games. He's cheaper on DraftKings than he is on FanDuel, which is always something I like. I feel like I'm getting a little bit of a discount, so I feel more comfortable buying in. We know FVV, Fred VanVleet, he's very volatile, so he's a little harder to trust. He's one of those, he has to score to do well, and he's a little bit too expensive for that role for me with all these guys being healthy still. Scotty Barnes is back. He's a fine play. He's a little cheap, which is why I think he might garner some ownership along with Siakam, but not like a must play or anything like that. Like the Sixers defense isn't one we like to pick on, but his price tag is just a little cheap. All right. Pacers versus the Wizards. This is one where I feel like some people might easily forget about this game. But you can't forget about Tyrese Halliburton. He hasn't crushed as much as we would have liked him to. We've played him a lot so far this season. At least I have. And he's had some smash games. He's had some disappointments. But this is a great matchup against the Wizards. And so I have absolutely no fear of playing him against this team. Benedict McDermott, he's always in play. More of a secondary play, not someone I really try to force. He's been struggling when it's come down to like his shooting performance. And so that's something to keep in mind. Basketball is very streaky. When you're on a cold streak, I usually like to wait for that turnaround on some guys, but sometimes you can buy back early, like you can buy in early, and then when he goes off, you have him at very low ownership. We played Kristaps Porzingis last time out, and he was average. He didn't do anything special. He wasn't bad, though. And I feel the same way about this spot for him. The Pacers historically haven't been great against bigs, but they haven't been... They've just been allowing like decent scores. Like they haven't really allowed those ceiling performances, which is what I would like to target. Porzingis definitely can do that in this spot, but not something that looks super enticing. So more of a secondary play for me at this price tag. Miles Turner came back last game as well, which really just makes this situation not must playable, which is nice for me because their front court is a shit show. But you can still play Miles Turner as like a GPP tournament play. Jalen Smith, Terry Taylor, Isaiah Jackson, all these guys are just more like fringe plays that you're trying to just hit on at low ownership. I wouldn't do it personally. It just feels too fringy. For me, it's really Tyrese Halliburton here. The Knicks versus the Bucks. The Knicks have been surprisingly good this year, surprisingly decent this year. They haven't really been that good. But people are starting to talk about them. People are starting to talk about Jalen Brunson after that huge game. He's had a lot of just average, mediocre games, but last game was his ceiling game. He hit the nuts line, which was nice to see. Julius Randle has been a true GPP guy through and through. We've seen multiple ceiling games. We've seen some just very average games. He's had some rough games as well. So definitely something to keep an eye on. RJ Barrett finally had a decent game the other night. He was starting off pretty slow, but he finally passed 30 points, which was nice to see. And then last on this team, Mitchell Robinson is also potentially still in play. Probably not someone I'm going to get a ton of exposure to, but you definitely can. I know a lot of people played Mitch Rob against the Hornets because bigs against the Hornets. And he crushed on FanDuel because he was getting multiple blocks and things of that sort, but he wasn't really needed on DraftKings. On the other side of this, we have Giannis Antetokounmpo, who is super exciting. Probably going to be the MVP this year. This is going to be a tough race for that, actually. There's multiple studs just scoring at a high level, where it's going to make that a very close race. But Giannis, kind of like Luka, he's always in play. I don't have to tell you guys to play Giannis. He has a 35.8 usage rate. He scores at an incredible rate. We've seen him score very well already this season. I'm not going to spell it out for you guys. You guys already know what he does. I do think Jrue Holiday is always an interesting consideration for tournaments. He's a 28.6% usage rate, 1.27 fantasy points a minute. He is always doing well. Exactly, Terrell. Like, it's him or Luka. Like, it's him, Luka. I know some people are trying to put, like, Ja Morant in that race. People are trying to put Jokic in that race. There's probably some other guys I'm forgetting, too. But it's definitely going to be interesting. So yeah, for me, when I think about this game, it's like Giannis and Jalen Brunson are kind of like your clear and obvious, like, if you're going to play guys from this game, that's probably where you want to attack. Whereas like Julius Randle, Jrue Holiday, Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis, guys of that sort are going to be more of your like GPP flyers here. There's not a ton of value yet in this game. And really just kind of like across the slate, not a ton of slate besides this like Portland game until we get more news. For the Lakers, Russell Westbrook, he's questionable. He might play. Does that mean he's not getting traded? I don't know. Both Russell Westbrook and Anthony Davis are questionable. If I had to guess, and I think most people are going to play it this way, I think people are going to assume Russell Westbrook is not going to play because everyone's convinced he's getting traded. And then Anthony Davis, everyone's probably going to assume is in play. So these usage rates are insane. Without Westbrook on the floor so far this season, LeBron James has had a 35.8% usage rate with 1.56 fantasy points a minute. That's insane. The next closest person is Anthony Davis with 26.8% of the usage on that team. I think both are in play here. The Minnesota Timberwolves have surprisingly been bad against bigs this season. With Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns, which really messes my head up a little bit. But it's fine, I guess. But LeBron James definitely in play here. Smash spot for him. What's the spread in this game? It's pretty large. It looks like they think the Timberwolves are going to win by a good bit here. And if that's the case, and if you expect the Timberwolves to dominate, Cat's been a really big part of this offense so far this season. And he's really starting to look pretty good. So no fears going back there. The risky parts of this team that always have a chance of going off are like your D'Angelo Russells and Anthony Edwards. Anthony Edwards is a bona fide star, so that's not really too surprising. But D'Angelo Russell, he's had another just very volatile guy. We've seen some ceiling performances, or we've seen some okay performances, and we've seen some bad performances out of him. I think I'm going to avoid this situation for the most part, just because there's a lot of mouths to feed here. But the Lakers look interesting. Guys like the guard position, definitely if Westbrook is out, guys like Lonnie Walker, Patrick Beverly, Austin Reeves, Kendrick Nunn. I feel like I'm forgetting someone. Patrick Beverly, Austin Reeves, Lonnie Walker. Yeah, those are like the main four guys that I think you can definitely consider as well, especially if Russell Westbrook ends up being out. If Westbrook actually stays, the Lakers fan base is going to be pissed, and that'll be fun to watch. But I would say this game's pretty avoidable for the most part if Russell plays. Besides, like the Timberwolves side, you might want a little bit of exposure to, but I probably wouldn't touch any Lakers if Westbrook plays. Yeah, probably still not LBJ either. All right, next game. We have the Bulls versus the San Antonio Spurs. You guys know I love Keldon Johnson. Keldon Johnson wasn't great in his last game, if I'm remembering correctly. He kind of disappointed me in particular. Felt a little personal. But he's had a 30.7 usage rate and 1.29 fantasy points per minute. And so he's definitely the guy on this team still. Doesn't really concern me. The Bulls matchup isn't the softest, but it's average. It's still a spot where I like him. With Vassell off the court this season, I think he's always going to look like a really strong option. Joshua Primo will also be out for this game as well. So we already know that put Josh Richardson in the nuts last time out. The scary thing about guys like Richardson is that he is scoring dependent and he is slightly more expensive as well this time out. So there's always some fear that if he misses his shots, he won't score well. But, he's cheap. Good spot for him. Vassell's out. No reason to really overthink it. Sochan can be in play as well. This is just like a value spot. Like with these Spurs, when there's guys out, this is just where we're trying to get value because as you guys saw from the other games, there's just not a lot of value. And so that's what I've been doing so far this season, actually. It's just we've had limited value, just kind of like across the board for most of these slates. And so what I've been doing, and some of you guys might have noticed this on the pre-lock show, is I've been Xing out the value in other games that the optimizer or other people might try to force in the lineups and really just focusing on the good value. The value doesn't always come through, and sometimes my lineups still don't look that great, but at least it's value that I feel slightly more comfortable with. And so, once again, I'm just telling the domination station what to do, and it's not telling me. That was a little bit of a random tangent, but hopefully it helps somebody out there. But yeah, Keldon Johnson's good for this game. Zach LaVine comes into this game questionable. So definitely keep an eye out for that. If he is out, we're definitely playing some DeMar DeRozan at this price tag. I would love that. With them all healthy, they're all plays for potential ceiling games. We've seen Vucevic have some of those as well, but the production has definitely declined since LaVine has come back. So definitely something that I'm going to keep a close eye on, but I think LaVine probably plays. So it's not something that you have to overthink too much. Okay. I don't think we have to get to some of these other guys like Alex Caruso and AO. I don't think you have to get there today. You can. I don't think I'm going to, though. All right. The Jazz versus the Nuggets. Jokic, man. I feel like he's on every slate, like without a doubt. He's always, he's always in play in absolutely any format. He had a nice game last time out with 66 points on DraftKings. So he's definitely in good form. I have a lot less concern with him playing with Michael Porter Jr. and things of that sort. As of right now, I don't think I'm going to have a ton of exposure to him. I'll have a little bit of exposure, just enough so I can put him in one of my smaller field tournaments. But I don't think I'll be over the field by much. Lauri Markkanen, he had a nice bounce back game after he hurt us all last time out. All right, we have a question from Bridgeline. When your lineup looks ugly, is that a good lineup? I'm trying to think back to a few times I've taken down some tournaments. It depends. Like sometimes I love my lines, and then I make money because I'll win. I'll take down a tournament, get 10K or something like that. And you can win. You can win liking your lines. I would say most of the time, though, there's at least like one or two spots that I have some concern about. Like the entire line isn't ugly, but there's like one or two spots where I'm like, oh, this is risky. And I've had big wins with that. So I would say like ugly lines, like that's when you get some of your like really big wins. Like I think a couple of years ago, I played Joel Embiid coming off of an injury and no one else was really on him. And I think that's when I took down the 100K with 20 lines. So that line looked ugly and I had people laughing at me for it. I had a lot of like professional DFS players telling me that I was stupid for it. But it works out sometimes. Nice. Raleigh in the building. I'm in Greensboro. Not too far, man. Nice to have some DFS players nearby. All right. So Jokic, we talked about. Lauri Markkanen bounce back after hurting us all. He's starting to get a little bit more expensive, so not like the must play that he was for a while. Jordan Clarkson has performed well on this team. He has a 23.9% usage rate with a 1.11 fantasy point per minute production, which is really good on the season, but he's still priced appropriately. So not a lot of like just really strong must plays. Kelly Olynyk, Are we talking about him still? Are we able to talk about Kelly Olynyk? I went back to him after he hurt me last time. Then he hurt us again this time. His shots were not falling. And so that's been the main reason why his production hasn't been there. But he is facing Jokic. In theory, they will need his height, and so he'll need to play. So this is a place where you can play Kelly O. You can play some Kelly O. He's in the player pool. He's an option. Some of these other value options down here, I'm not really a big Jared Vanderbilt guy. Never have been. If he pops into some of my lines, though, I probably won't be too upset, but I'm not going to force it. Michael Porter Jr., questionable. We'll see if he plays. Jamal Murray hasn't been playing a full allotment of minutes, so I'm not really going to consider him yet. He's been around like 28 minutes-ish. When he gets to 30 plus, then we'll start to play him. And Bruce Brown has looked solid here lately with Michael Porter Jr. out. Like, Bruce Brown has really been helping this team, and I think they might have to start considering him to start at some point. I think they need that shooting, but we'll see. All right, next game. We're almost done, guys. We're almost through it. All right, we have the Suns and Pelicans. Pretty wide spread here, which makes me think that there's definitely going to be some people out for this game. As of right now, we have a pretty long list of questionable guys. We have CJ McCollum, Zion, Herb Jones, Jose Alvarado, and Brandon Ingram is actually out. So this is a situation we're going to want to watch carefully. I think we're going to get a lot of value from this game. But can't talk about it now because we honestly don't know. We don't know because these guys aren't officially out yet. Once they're out, then we can talk about it. So for now, we'll focus on the Suns. Suns are a team that I prefer to play when they are facing another just really good team. And if the Pelicans have a lot of guys out and this game's going to have a wide spread, I'm not as interested in Devin Booker with everyone else healthy. But this does, at least on paper, look like a really good matchup for him. He's had a 29.8% usage rate, which is insane. And this is a solid spot to go back to Booker. I totally understand it. Decently priced, not bad at all. Probably a really strong, like smart EV plus EV play. Just one that I'm probably not going to. I don't know. I'm on the fence. We'll just say I'm on the fence for now, because it is a nice spot. Ayton his price hasn't gone up too much. Still like a decent center value. Depending on who's available for the Pelicans will really depend on what this matchup looks like. So hard to judge. If a lot of those guys are out, though, this could be a super easy matchup for Ayton. But I think he'll still have to face Valanciunas. So still not that easy of a matchup. All right. And then, of course, like Mikal Bridges is always an option as like a fill-in tournament spot because he has some upside. And I'll put Cam Johnson in that box as well. All right. Last game on the slate. Probably one of the most interesting ones. Okay. From a DFS standpoint, probably one of the most interesting ones. Yeah. Okay. Bridgeline, I mentioned, like, I have 2 risky spots in my lines. And I think that's like the perfect number. Sometimes I'll have like 3 spots I'm questionable on. But I like that number, like 2 or 3 spots that feel kind of risky. Like, oh, I want to throw up with this guy in my line. That's fine. Or not even throw up. It's like, oh, this guy scares me for whatever reason. All right. So for this last game, the Rockets will still have Bruno Fernando out. Sengun might be back. I think that's all of the major news for the Rockets. Nothing too crazy for them. The big news, the most important news, the thing that we all care about is that Damian Lillard is out for the Trailblazers for a little bit of time, a good chunk of time, which is kind of sad because a lot of these guys, like this team was actually starting to look decent, and now he's out. But anyway, I think that's a really good spot for Anthony Simmons. He's probably going to be the chalk, or at least like a really big piece of the chalk. We've seen Nurkic, his rates have gone up, including Josh Hart. Like Nurkic, Simmons, Hart. I don't know if they're going to be core plays for me yet, but at least one or two of them probably will be. In regards to the Rockets, we can always play like Kevin Porter Jr., Jalen Green. They run this team in the backcourt. Jalen Green I'll need to dig into him a little bit more because I'm not certain how he performed last time out, so I need to look into that. But not bad plays. This is a good matchup for Kevin Porter. Portland is just a very soft team defensively from the backcourt position, so this is a nice matchup for him and Jalen Green along with that. But yeah, guys, that's the slate for you. It's a big one. It's a long one. We're trying to make some money, and there's definitely some great spots for that. Definitely like in this first game with the Hornets and Magic, and then the Trailblazers, Rockets, and then this Portland game with the Spurs, this Pelicans game, and then the Spurs game against the Bulls are probably like some of my favorite spots looking for value. And there's just a few spots with some of these games, like with the Raptors and Sixers, the Timberwolves, the Nuggets, and the Bucks, where you can take a few tournament pieces here and there and try to take down a tournament. I'll add the Hawks in there too. There's like a few spots we can still get creative with. So I think my plan today is going to be trying to fill in my lineups with most of like this value, some of these value spots, some of these studs who are just getting more usage increases. That's what I want most of my lineups to be filled with. And then I'll have a little bit of exposure to some of these other guys who are just in decent spots. And I'll have them as kind of like my tournament pivots. But yeah, guys, I think we're good to go. That's the tournament strategy run through. Like I mentioned earlier, we will be back at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time for the pre-lock show, and we can go to that. All right, there's a question, Adele. Anthony Simmons back up. Sharp, good value. Yeah, I mean, Simmons is a stud play today. In regards to, I'm assuming, I think you're talking about Shaedon Sharp for Trailblazers. Yeah, he should be in the starting lineup, which would be very interesting. He looks like one of the better value options. Yeah, for sure. Let's look. Let's look at what we're dealing with here. All right, Shaedon Sharp. Yeah, he's looking like one of the better value options on the slate, along with like Justice Winslow as well. They're both popping. But I'm still not certain what I'm going to do with this situation. Check in later for the pre-lock show. I'll know what I'm doing with the situation in much more detail by then. What's your minimum price you're willing to roster in your lineup? I don't have a minimum price. Honestly, I'll play like a $3,000 guy as long as it makes sense to. A lot of those things I just don't pay attention to. Like people ask all the time, like, what are your... I don't know. People ask just different things that I'm looking at. A lot of that stuff I just don't hyper focus on for NBA. But all right, guys, I will see you guys later. It's been great. Deuces.